My name is Cora. I am 31 years old, and for most of my life, I have been the family's simplest solution, quiet, dependable, and endlessly available. Before I tell you how I took everything back, like and subscribe, because this twist is going to shock you. Now comment your country and current time. Let's see how far this story has reached. I have worked in an ICU long enough to understand a truth most people avoid until it is forced into their hands. Devotion is rarely rewarded in real time. It is assumed. It becomes part of the atmosphere, like oxygen, unnoticed until it is gone. In my family, I was that oxygen. My older sister, Melanie, was the centerpiece. Melanie was the one my parents spoke about with a softness that never landed on me. She was the one whose mistakes were treated like weather, unfortunate, temporary, and never quite her fault. If she overspent, it was because she stressed. If she quit a job, it was because she deserves better. If she made a reckless decision, my mother would sigh and say, "You know how Melanie is. She needs support." I, on the other hand, did not need support. I was the support. It started when we were children. Melanie got a bedroom painted the color of cotton candy, with a matching bedspread and little frame quotes about dreaming big. I got hand-me-down furniture and a list of chores taped to my door like a schedule for a job I never applied for. Melanie got praise for existing. I got attention when something went wrong. By the time I became an adult, the pattern had matured into something almost patriarchal in its certainty. The capable child becomes the family's labor. The fragile child becomes the family's priority. And if you dare to question that arrangement, you are accused of cruelty. It wasn't always overt. My parents weren't cartoon villains. They weren't loud. They weren't constantly shouting. They were worse than that. They were dismissive in a gentle way. The kind of dismissal that sounds like reason. The kind that makes you doubt your own boundaries. "Melanie needs it more than you," my mother would say, as if she were discussing groceries or gas prices. "Stop being selfish," my father would add, his tone measured, as if he were disciplining a child who had forgotten her place. "You'll understand," they'd finish together. As if understanding was the only acceptable form of surrender. I learned early that the fastest way to keep peace was to comply. So I complied. I complied when Melanie borrowed my things and returned them broken. I complied when she forgot my birthday and my mother told me not to be dramatic. I complied when I paid for dinners, covered small emergencies, smoothed over awkward situations that Melanie created and then floated away from like smoke. And then my grandmother began to decline. Grandma Eleanor was not a delicate woman by nature. She had raised 3 children on a tight budget, kept a house immaculate with hands rough from work, and walked through grief as if it were another chore on the calendar. But age has a way of turning even the strongest people into someone you can lose in inches. It started with small things. A misplaced purse. A forgotten appointment. A momentary pause in conversation where her eyes clouded over, as if the thought she had been reaching for had slipped out of her grasp. Then it became bigger. A fall in the kitchen. A bruise that spread like ink over thin skin. Medication that needed monitoring, not just reminders. My mother would call me with updates that sounded like obligations. "Your grandmother's blood pressure is all over the place. She needs another specialist. The copays are getting ridiculous." She never asked how my shifts were going. She never asked if I was sleeping. She never asked if I was eating properly. She simply presented the problem. And I, as always, became the solution. That is how the medical fund began. It was a Sunday afternoon when my father sat at the kitchen table with paperwork spread out in front of him, frowning at bills as if he could intimidate them into shrinking. Melanie was there too, leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone with the casual detachment of someone whose life was not held together by numbers. My mother said, "We should all contribute. For your grandmother. It's only fair." Fair. That word made my stomach tighten, because fair in my family usually meant Cora will handle it. Still, I nodded. "Okay," I said. "Let's set something up properly." I created a joint account with a simple name, Eleanor Care Fund. I added my parents. I added Melanie. I set up automatic transfers from my paycheck, $500 a month. I did it quietly. I did it efficiently. I did it the way I do everything, without expecting applause. Every month, the money left my account like clockwork. It left after nights where I held strangers' hands as their bodies betrayed them. After shifts where I listened to machines beep in steady patterns that sounded like controlled panic. After mornings where I drove home on empty streets, my eyes burning, the sunrise feeling irrelevant. I would come home, peel off my scrubs, wash my hands until the hospital smell faded, and check the notification. Transfer complete. And I felt, in those moments, a strange kind of peace. Because if I couldn't control illness, I could at least control dignity. Grandma would have her medicine. She would have her appointments. She would not be treated like an inconvenience. For 2 years, I did this. 24 months. $12,000. It wasn't money I tossed casually into a fund. It was money I earned through exhaustion. Through sacrifice. Through choosing responsibility even when no one asked me if I was tired of being chosen for it. My parents didn't thank me much. They'd say small things like, "Good," or "That helps," as if my contribution were simply what was expected. Melanie, of course, said nothing at all. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't a notification. It was a feeling. You learn to trust feelings in the ICU. They are often the first alarm before the monitors catch up. Something in the room changes. A patient's breathing becomes subtly irregular. A hand grows colder. The air shifts. I had that same sensation one evening after work. It was late, and it had started to rain, cold, persistent, the kind of rain that makes the world look permanently tired. I walked into my apartment, dropped my bag by the door, and opened my laptop to review upcoming medical expenses for Grandma. She had an appointment scheduled with a cardiologist. There was a new prescription that wasn't fully covered by insurance. It wasn't a crisis yet, but it was approaching one. I logged into the fund account. The screen loaded. And for a moment, I thought it hadn't loaded properly. Because the number staring back at me made no sense. Balance, $847.13. I blinked once. Then again. My mind tried to correct it. Maybe I clicked the wrong account. Maybe the website was glitching. Maybe I was too tired. But the number did not change. $847. After 2 years of consistent deposits. My fingers went cold on the keyboard. I clicked through transaction history with a quiet, growing dread. Withdrawals, transfers. Large amounts moved out in chunks that made my stomach drop deeper with each click. And then I saw it, the name attached to the transfers. Melanie. For a long moment, I didn't breathe. I sat there in my small apartment, the rain tapping against the window, and felt something unfamiliar in my body. Not anger first. Shock. A kind of stunned disbelief that anything so brazen could be done by people who still called me family. My hands began to tremble. I pressed my palm against the desk to steady them. Then I grabbed my phone and called my mother. She answered on the third ring, cheerful, as if I might be calling to share something light. "Hi, honey," she said. "Where is the money?" I asked. A pause. "What money?" she replied, already defensive. "The fund," I said, my voice still calm but sharpened by something controlled. "Grandma's medical fund. It has $800 left." Another pause, longer this time. Then my mother sighed, a sound I knew well. The sigh she used when she wanted to suggest I was overreacting without openly saying it. "Cora," she said gently, "don't start." I closed my eyes. "I'm not starting. I'm asking. Where is it?" There was movement on her end, the faint sound of a television in the background. Domestic comfort. The luxury of ignorance. My mother lowered her voice. "Melanie moved it," she said, as if she were admitting someone had borrowed a sweater. My throat tightened. "Moved it where?" "It's an investment," my mother said quickly. "She found an opportunity. It's going to grow." I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how someone could say that sentence about money meant for an elderly woman's medication. Mom, I said quietly, that was for Grandma's care. She'll be fine, my mother replied, her voice turning slightly sharper. Your sister knows what she's doing. I felt something in my chest crack, not loud, but deep. Put Melanie on the phone, I said. My mother hesitated. Then I heard muffled movement, and finally Melanie's voice came through. What? She asked, as if I were interrupting her leisure. Where is Grandma's money? I asked again. Melanie laughed lightly. It's not gone. Relax, relax. I repeated, my voice still calm but now edged with disbelief. It's in a deal, she said. Real estate. It was time sensitive, time sensitive. As if urgency could justify theft. You took $12,000 without telling me, I said. Melanie's tone shifted into something practiced, wounded innocence. I didn't take it, she said. I moved it. You're being dramatic. I swallowed, tasting bitterness. Dramatic would be Grandma not being able to afford her medicine. Melanie sighed. Cora, you act like you're the only one who cares. I almost laughed then, but it would have been too ugly. I am the only one who paid, I said quietly. There was a pause, and then my father's voice entered the line, heavy with irritation. What's going on? He asked. Melanie must have handed him the phone, because suddenly he was speaking directly to me. Cora, he said, why are you making this into a fight? My hands tightened around my phone. Because the fund is empty. It's not empty, he snapped. You heard your sister. My sister stole it, I said, my voice still level but now unmistakably firm. My father exhaled sharply. Don't use that word. What word should I use? I asked. Borrowed? Misplaced? Reallocated? Melanie needs it more than you, he said, as if repeating it could make it moral. Stop being selfish. The word selfish hit me like a slap. I sat very still, listening to the rain outside, feeling the strange sensation of my own devotion being turned against me. You'll understand, my mother added in the background, her voice soft, almost soothing. And in that moment, I realized the betrayal was not just Melanie's. It was the family's. Melanie was simply the hand that took. My parents were the ones holding the door open. I ended the call without another word. Not because I had nothing to say. Because I suddenly understood that speaking would not change them. It would only exhaust me. And I was done spending my energy on people who treated my generosity like a renewable resource. That night, I sat in silence and watched my phone screen light up with messages I didn't open. Because I already knew what they would say. They would accuse me of being ungrateful. They would accuse me of being harsh. They would try to make my boundaries sound like cruelty. And the rain kept falling, steady and indifferent, as if the world itself was washing its hands of the entire thing. I went to bed with my stomach tight and my heart heavier than it had been after any shift at the hospital. Because at least in the ICU, when someone took from you, it was because they were dying. In my family, they took from me because they were comfortable doing it. The next morning, I went to work as if my life hadn't just been quietly robbed. That is the strangest part of being the easy daughter. Even after betrayal, people still expect you to function. They assume you will keep showing up, at jobs, at family obligations, at emotional disasters that are never truly yours. In the ICU, I moved from bed to bed with practiced precision. I adjusted drips, read monitors, documented vitals, kept my voice calm for frightened families who needed stability more than reassurance. But inside me, something had shifted. Not into rage. Into clarity. There is a point where heartbreak stops begging for comfort and starts demanding a verdict. I drove home in the rain again, windshield wipers moving like metronomes, and I didn't cry. I didn't even feel dramatic. I felt sober. I opened my laptop that evening and pulled up the fund's transaction history again. Not because I needed to relive the injury. Because I needed to study it. Amounts transferred out, dates, patterns. The kind of trail that always exists when someone thinks they're too clever to be caught. Melanie hadn't taken the money slowly like a nervous thief. She had taken it confidently, large transfers, clean intervals, as if she believed the rules would never apply to her. And why wouldn't she believe that? My parents had spent her entire life teaching her that consequences were for other people. My phone buzzed around 9. Mom! I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then another call. Dad! Then Melanie texted. You're really doing the most. Can you stop? Grandma doesn't even know the details. The phrase doing the most wasn't her trying to sound clever. It was her trying to sound superior. As if my concern for stolen medical money was an inconvenience to her schedule. I put my phone down and made tea I barely drank. The rain continued outside, tapping softly against the glass like a patient, repetitive warning. Then my Ring camera app sent me an alert. Motion detected, front door. I almost ignored it. I lived in a quiet building, but sometimes neighbors passed too close to the entryway. Still, instinct made me open it. And the moment I did, my breath stopped. Because there they were. My parents, Melanie. Standing on my porch like actors arriving for rehearsal. My mother's shoulders were set in that careful posture she used when she wanted to seem fragile and reasonable. My father stood beside her, stern-faced, arms crossed, as if he had already decided the conversation would be my fault. Melanie stood slightly behind them, scrolling through her phone, lips pursed in bored irritation. And then my mother spoke. Not to me, because I wasn't there. To herself. Okay, she whispered, smoothing her cardigan. We go in calm. We say we're sorry. We say we miss her. We say we didn't mean for it to get this far. My father nodded slowly, almost like a director approving the line delivery. Melanie exhaled, annoyed. Just say it fast, she muttered. I have to take a call. My mother turned to her, frowning. Melanie. We have to sound sincere. Melanie rolled her eyes. And then she said the sentence that cut deeper than the missing money ever could. We don't actually have to mean it. We just need her to think we're sorry. I felt something go cold in my chest. Not because I was surprised. Because I realized this was not a family conflict. This was a strategy. A performance with a goal. My father leaned toward my mother and lowered his voice. If she pushes, remind her she's always been sensitive. My mother nodded, yes. And tell her grandma is upset. That will soften her. Melanie looked up from her phone. And if she doesn't forgive us, then what? My father's jaw tightened. Then we freeze her out. No invitations. No updates. We make her regret it. It was a calm cruelty, efficient, almost administrative. Then Melanie's phone rang. Her entire demeanor changed. She stepped a few feet away from my parents, turning her body sideways, the way people do when they don't want to be overheard. I turned the volume up. Hello? Melanie said sharply. A man's voice crackled through, distorted slightly by distance and the porch acoustics. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. Deadline, the voice said, tense. Closing, tomorrow. Melanie's face tightened. I told you I'm handling it, she hissed. Just stall them. I'll have it by tomorrow. The man said something else, clipped and urgent. Melanie snapped, don't threaten me. If you pull out, I'll be screwed. She went quiet for a second, listening. Then she lowered her voice into something almost pleading. Just give me until tomorrow, she said. I swear, I'll fix it. She hung up and turned back to my parents, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. What was that? My mother asked softly. Nothing, Melanie said too quickly. Just business. My father frowned. You sure this investment is solid? Melanie's tone sharpened. Yes. Stop interrogating me. My mother smoothed the air with her hands, like she could calm greed into looking like love. All right, all right. We're here for Cora. Melanie scoffed. We're here because she's being difficult. Then my mother stepped forward, lifted her hand, and knocked on my door. I sat on my couch, watching it all through a camera feed, feeling a melancholy so deep it was almost elegant. Because this was what I had been to them. Not a daughter. A resource they could reset with the right lines. I didn't open the door. I let them knock again. And again. Then my father leaned close to the peephole and raised his voice. Cora, don't be childish, childish. The word almost made me smile. Because it was always their favorite insult for my boundaries. Eventually, they left. Not with panic. With irritation. As if the world had violated them by refusing access to my patience. The porch went empty again. But the damage stayed. Because now I didn't just know they had taken my money. I knew they had rehearsed my emotions like they were a script. That night, I slept for exactly 3 hours. Not because I was spiraling. Because my mind was working. In the morning, between sips of coffee and the dull ache behind my eyes, I did something I had never done before. I stopped being polite. I opened every thread of communication that had ever felt off. I searched Melanie's name in old messages. I searched phrases my mother used when she wanted something. Just this once. Family helps family. You're so good at handling things. I found a group chat. One I hadn't noticed before because I was never meant to. It was my mother and Melanie. And the messages weren't even subtle. They were transactional. My mother, ask her after her shift. She's softer when she's tired. Melanie, she'll do it. She always does. She's easy. My stomach tightened. Another message. My mother, don't tell your father the full amount. He'll worry. Melanie, he worries about me, not her. It's fine. And then the final one, sent just days before I checked the balance. Melanie, if she notices, we'll do the apology thing. She'll fold. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my fingers resting on the keyboard like they didn't belong to me. Because in those messages, I wasn't their daughter. I was their system. Their predictable solution. I saved everything, screenshots, timestamps. Full threads. Then I called the one person in my family who had always made my mother uneasy. My Aunt Diane. My mother's sister. A woman who never smiled to keep the peace. She smiled only when something amused her, and my mother rarely did. She answered on the first ring. Cora, she said, voice smooth. You don't call unless something serious is happening. It is, I replied. There was a pause. Tell me. So I did. I told her about the fund. The missing money. Melanie's investment. The way my parents defended her with that same tired logic, Melanie needs it more, stop being selfish, you'll understand. I told her about the porch rehearsal. Then I told her about the group chat. When I finished, Aunt Diane exhaled slowly. Not surprised. Disappointed. Your mother, she said quietly, has always been generous with other people's endurance. I swallowed. What do I do? You document everything, she replied. Which you already did. Yes. And then you stop trying to win a private argument, she continued. Because they'll keep moving the goalposts. You win publicly. In a room where they can't rewrite the story. My throat tightened. Grandma's birthday is next week. Perfect, Aunt Diane said. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't sound excited. She sounded surgical. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, she said, your grandmother is turning 75, and family like yours treats milestones as leverage. Melanie will be there, performing devotion. Your parents will be there, managing perception. And you will be there with truth. I hesitated. I don't want to hurt Grandma. Aunt Diane's voice softened by a single degree. You're not hurting her. You're protecting her. Then she added, and Cora. That deadline you mentioned. That wasn't nothing. That was pressure. Which means Melanie didn't invest the money. What did she do? I asked quietly. Aunt Diane paused. Likely tried to rescue a collapsing situation, debt. A bad deal. A deposit she couldn't cover. People don't use medical funds when they have other options. My pulse deepened. My work friend Priya texted as if she sensed the moment. You okay? Priya had seen me stand steady through tragedy at work. She knew when my calm wasn't peace, it was containment. I typed back. I'm handling something personal. But I'm okay. Priya replied instantly. Call if you need a ride or backup. I'll come. And for the first time in days, I felt something rare. Support that didn't require payment. Grandma Eleanor's 75th birthday party was held at my parents' house. Of course it was. My mother believed hosting gave her authority. She curated the living room like a magazine spread, fresh flowers, framed photos, pastel napkins folded with obsessive precision. The dining table was set with the good china that my grandmother rarely saw anymore. When I arrived, the house smelled like sugar and artificial warmth. A playlist of old classics played softly in the background. Relatives gathered in clusters, smiling too hard, talking too loudly, pretending this was simply a celebration and not the usual subtle competition for favor. Melanie was already there. She stood near the kitchen island, laughing brightly, wearing a dress that looked expensive and fragile, like it was designed to signal she deserved protection. When she saw me, her smile tightened. Then widened again, as if she remembered cameras existed everywhere now. Oh my God, she said, loud enough for the room. Cora, hi. My mother moved toward me immediately, arms open as if nothing had happened. There you are, she said, voice overly sweet. We've been so worried. The word sounded rehearsed. My father stood behind her, expression stern but not quite confident. His eyes flicked over me the way they do when a person is trying to determine whether the rules still apply. I smiled politely. Hi, Mom. Melanie stepped closer, lowering her voice just slightly. Are you done with your little performance? She asked. I looked at her calmly. I'm here for Grandma. Melanie's eyes narrowed. Good. Then don't ruin this. My mother turned toward Melanie and touched her arm, as if soothing an anxious child. It's fine, she murmured. We're all together now. Together, yes. In the way wolves gather quietly before deciding who gets to eat. Grandma Eleanor sat in her favorite chair near the window, wrapped in a soft cardigan. Her hair was thinner, her hands more delicate, but her eyes were still sharp. When she saw me, her face brightened with genuine relief. Cora, she said, reaching out. Come here. I crossed the room and knelt beside her. Hi, Grandma. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. You look tired, she murmured. I smiled softly. I'm okay. She studied me like she could see past politeness. Your mother said you've been upset. I glanced toward my mother, who was watching us carefully. I've been busy, I said calmly. Grandma's eyes moved toward Melanie. Where's my other girl? She asked, though her tone held a quiet skepticism. Melanie appeared instantly, sliding into place like a performer hitting her mark. Grandma, she chirped. Happy birthday. She kissed Grandma's cheek, overly affectionate, while my mother watched with pride. Grandma smiled politely, but her eyes remained on me. And then she said, quietly, we need to talk later. My chest tightened. Because Grandma Eleanor wasn't just old. She was observant. Dinner passed with forced laughter and polished small talk. Melanie told stories that made her sound adventurous rather than irresponsible. My mother nodded along, delighting in the illusion. My father made jokes that landed flat, but the room laughed anyway. And I sat there, calm, patient, letting them build their stage. After cake was served, a tall white cake with delicate sugar flowers, my mother clinked her glass. Before we do presents, she announced, Mom has something special she wants to say. The room quieted. Grandma's hands rested on the arms of her chair. She looked smaller than she used to, but her posture held the last remnants of authority. I do, Grandma said softly. I've been thinking. Melanie leaned forward, smiling as if she expected a reward. My mother beamed. My father folded his hands, ready for legacy talk. Grandma continued, I've been thinking about the house. My mother's smile froze slightly. Melanie's eyes brightened like greed recognizing a familiar scent. This house has been in our family a long time, Grandma said. And I've decided I want to make sure it goes where it belongs. Melanie glanced at my parents, almost triumphant. I felt Aunt Diane shift slightly beside me, calm as stone. Grandma's gaze moved across the room. Then she looked directly at Melanie. Melanie smiled wider, already accepting the inheritance in her mind. And that was when my mother stepped in. "Mom," she said quickly, "Melanie has been so helpful lately." "She's been." Grandma lifted a hand. My mother stopped mid-sentence. The room went very still. And then Melanie, with that same effortless arrogance, decided to manage the moment. "Grandma," she said, voice soft and sweet, "we all just want what's best for you. Some people get overwhelmed. But I've been here. I've been trying to hold things together." Her eyes flicked toward me, subtle, poisonous. The implication was clear. I was the unstable one. The dramatic one. The problem. My father cleared his throat. "Cora's been emotional," he said, as if it were a diagnosis. "It's been hard." My mother nodded with practiced sadness. "She's under so much stress. She took things the wrong way." And there it was. They were about to do it again. They were about to take my legitimate grief and turn it into evidence against me. Aunt Diane leaned toward me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now," she said. I stood. Not abruptly. Not angrily. Just, deliberately. Every eye turned toward me. Melanie's smile faltered. "Cora," my mother said sharply, "sit down. Don't do this." My father's tone hardened. "Not today." I looked at them calmly. "Today is exactly the day." Melanie's voice turned thin. "Oh my God. You're really going to do this in front of Grandma?" I met her gaze. "You did it in front of Grandma when you took her medical money." The room reacted like I dropped glass. My mother gasped, "Cora." "Don't," I said quietly, and the single word stopped her. Because my calm was no longer compliance. It was control. I picked up my phone and turned the screen outward. "I didn't come here to argue," I said. "I came here to correct something." Melanie laughed nervously. "What is this? Another one of your dramatic scenes?" Aunt Diane stood beside me now, her presence instantly shifting the energy. "This is evidence," she said, voice smooth. "And if anyone wants to interrupt, I recommend you think carefully before doing so." My mother's face went pale. "Diane. What are you doing?" Aunt Diane didn't look at her. Watching the truth arrive. I pressed play. The Ring camera footage filled the screen, and I angled the phone so the room could hear. My mother's voice floated out first, soft and rehearsed. "Okay. We go in calm. We say we're sorry." My father's voice followed. "If she pushes, remind her she's always been sensitive." Melanie's voice, sharp, bored, cut through like a blade. "We don't actually have to mean it. We just need her to think we're sorry." The room went silent in a way that felt almost sacred. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father's face turned rigid, his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Melanie's eyes widened with something like panic. "That's," she started. I didn't stop the video yet. I let it continue. Melanie's tense phone call played next, the word deadline audible enough to land like a clue. Then I stopped it. I looked at Grandma. Her face had changed, not into rage, but into a quiet devastation. The kind that comes when you realize someone has been treating your life like a bargaining chip. I took a breath. Then I opened my screenshots. "I also found messages," I said calmly, "between Melanie and Mom." My mother whispered, "Cora, please." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I simply read. "Ask her after her shift. She's softer when she's tired." A visible flinch ran through my mother's face. Then the next one. "She'll do it. She always does. She's easy." My father's eyes snapped toward my mother, shocked, not by the betrayal, but by being exposed to it. Melanie stepped forward quickly, hands out, voice pleading. Okay, this is out of context." Aunt Diane's voice cut through, calm and lethal. "What context makes stealing medical funds acceptable?" Melanie's face crumpled. I didn't steal. I invested it. Grandma Eleanor spoke then, her voice quiet but unmistakably sharp. You used my care money, she said. Melanie's eyes darted. I was going to put it back. When? I asked softly. Melanie swallowed. Her lips trembled. And that, more than anything, told the truth. Because people who plan to repay don't avoid details. They provide them. My mother rushed forward, reaching for Grandma's hand. Mom, please, don't get upset. Grandma pulled her hand back. The gesture was small, but it felt like a door locking. Then Grandma looked at me. Cora, she said quietly, how much? 12,000, I answered. The room inhaled as one body. My father's shoulders slumped slightly, as if the number finally turned shame into weight. Melanie tried to speak again. Grandma, I swear. Grandma raised her hand. Silence. Then she turned her gaze toward my parents. You let her do this, she said softly. My mother's eyes filled with tears, real this time, not rehearsed. We were trying to keep the family together. Grandma's voice stayed calm. You kept the wrong thing together. My father cleared his throat, voice rough. Mom. I didn't know it was that much. Grandma looked at him, unwavering. You didn't ask, she replied. That sentence landed like a verdict. Then Melanie, desperate now, turned toward me. Cora, she whispered, please. Don't do this. I'll fix it. I studied her face. For the first time, I didn't see my sister. I saw a woman accustomed to being rescued. And I realized something quietly profound. Melanie didn't hate me. She simply didn't respect me enough to believe I would ever stop. I spoke calmly, so the room could hear the finality in it. You don't fix this with promises, I said. You fix it with consequences. Aunt Diane stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. I've already prepared the paperwork, she said, looking at Grandma. We can protect your assets immediately. A trust restructure. A separate medical account. And recovery options. My mother's voice broke. Recovery options? Aunt Diane's gaze finally flicked toward her, cool, unimpressed. Meaning she pays it back, she said. Or the law helps her understand what repayment looks like. Melanie's face drained of color. No, she whispered. You wouldn't. Aunt Diane's smile was thin. Try me. Grandma Eleanor sat back in her chair, breathing steadily, her face composed in the aftermath of betrayal. Then she said, quietly, Melanie, you will not touch my house. You will not touch my money. And you will not touch my peace. Melanie's lips trembled. Grandma? Grandma cut her off with the kind of calm only a woman who has survived decades can summon. You wanted the easiest daughter to carry you, she said, looking toward me, and you wanted the loudest one to shine. She turned back to Melanie. But the world does not reward noise forever. My chest tightened, not with triumph, but with something heavier. Vindication always carries grief in its pocket. My mother began to cry openly. My father looked like a man realizing he had mistaken control for leadership. And Melanie, standing in the center of the room, stripped of her narrative, looked suddenly young, small, and terrified. Because she had finally met a world where charm could not supersede receipts. I glanced around the room one last time. Then I looked at Grandma. I'm sorry you had to hear it this way, I said softly. Grandma Eleanor reached out and squeezed my hand. No, she replied. I'm sorry you lived it that way. And in that moment, I understood. The climax wasn't the exposure. It was the reversal. The easy daughter had stopped being available for manipulation. And the entire system, built on my compliance, began to collapse. The room didn't recover after that. It tried, of course it tried. Families like mine have an instinct for restoration, not because they value truth, but because they value appearances. They are accustomed to varnishing wounds instead of treating them. But once a performance is exposed mid-scene, it becomes impossible to pretend the script was never written. My mother's crying turned into frantic negotiating. Please, she whispered, hands hovering in the air as if she could physically gather the moment back into something softer. Let's not do this here. Let's talk privately. We can fix this. Aunt Diane's voice remained even. You had privacy for 2 years, she said. You used it to siphon money meant for an elderly woman's care. My father stood, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the floor. He looked like a man trying to locate dignity in a room where it had been misplaced. Melanie, he said, voice rough, tell me the truth. Melanie's face was wet now, mascara beginning to blur at the corners. Not glamorous grief, panic. I was going to put it back, she pleaded, as if intention could replace arithmetic. I swear I was. It went bad. Aunt Diane tilted her head. What went bad? Melanie swallowed. The deal. What deal? Diane asked calmly. Melanie's lips parted, then closed. Her eyes darted toward my mother, searching for rescue. My mother flinched, the first sign that she knew more than she'd admitted. My stomach tightened, not with shock anymore, but with the quiet disgust of being proven right about every suspicion I'd ever tried to suppress. Aunt Diane pressed again, unfazed. Melanie, she said, if you tell the truth now, you might reduce the damage you're about to do to yourself. Melanie's shoulders shook, and then the truth spilled out in fragments, messy, insufficient, but real. It was a deposit, she whispered. For a property. A flipping thing. I thought I could double it fast. I needed the money to close. The word close landed like iron. The deadline call. Tomorrow. My mind replayed it instantly. The entire reason for the porch performance wasn't remorse. It was urgency. They weren't sorry. They were desperate. Grandma Eleanor's voice was low, but it carried authority like a bell. You gambled my care money, she said. Melanie's face crumpled. I didn't mean to. I was trying to fix my life. Grandma stared at her. At the cost of mine. The silence after that sentence was not dramatic. It was final. My mother stepped forward again, reaching for Grandma, voice trembling with pleading softness. Mom, please. Melanie was under pressure. You know she's sensitive. She panics. Grandma lifted her hand, and my mother stopped mid-step. No, Grandma said quietly. She doesn't panic. She consumes. My mother's breath caught, as if she'd been struck. My father's head snapped up. And for the first time, I watched my parents realize what I had always known. They hadn't been helping Melanie. They had been feeding something insatiable. The party ended early. Not with shouting, not with chaos, just the quiet dispersal of people who had witnessed something they couldn't unsee. Relatives gathered their coats with hurried politeness. People avoided my eyes, not because they blamed me, but because truth makes cowards uncomfortable. A few paused to whisper, I'm sorry, or I didn't know. I nodded each time, calm. Not magnanimous, just finished. Priya stood near the doorway, her presence steady like a pillar. She didn't ask 1,000 questions. She didn't offer fragile comfort. She simply touched my elbow and murmured, You handled it like a surgeon. I exhaled softly. That's what I am, I replied. Not in title. In temperament. When you spend years stabilizing other people, you learn how to keep your hands steady even when your heart is bleeding. Grandma Eleanor asked me to stay after everyone left. My mother and father lingered too, hovering with anxious uncertainty, like they were waiting for someone to give them a new role. Melanie had locked herself in the downstairs bathroom, crying loud enough to be heard through the door. It was the first time her tears sounded real. Not because she regretted what she did, but because she could feel consequences approaching her for the first time. Grandma sat in her chair near the window. The cake remained half-eaten on the table, the candles melted into wax puddles like small defeated sculptures. She looked at me with a gaze that held both gratitude and grief. Come here, she said softly. I crossed the room and sat beside her, careful not to overwhelm her fragile frame. I'm sorry, I said. She shook her head. Don't apologize for having eyes, she replied. I almost smiled, almost. Her fingers closed around mine, thin but firm. You were the one who kept giving, she said. And they treated it like a faucet. My throat tightened. I didn't want Grandma to suffer. I know, she replied. That's why they chose you. The words hit me, not cruelly, but honestly. My mother finally spoke, voice raw. Mom, I didn't think it would go this far. Grandma turned toward her, eyes steady. It went exactly as far as you let it, she said. My father stepped forward. We'll fix it, he said quickly. We'll make it right. Grandma's gaze didn't soften. How? She asked. My father hesitated. We'll pay it back. With what? I thought. But I didn't say it. Because it wasn't my job anymore to translate reality for them. Aunt Diane moved into the room like someone who had been waiting patiently for the moment logic would be allowed. This is what fixing it looks like, she said, placing her folder on the table and opening it with deliberate calm. She slid 3 documents forward. 1, she said, tapping the first page, a separate medical account for Eleanor that only Cora and Eleanor can access. My mother flinched. That's extreme. Aunt Diane's eyes barely flicked up. So was stealing. She tapped the second page. 2, a repayment agreement. $12,000, structured over time, with clear consequences if it is not honored. Melanie's crying from the bathroom became muffled, as if even she understood what was being discussed now. Diane tapped the third page. And 3, she said, voice crisp, a trust adjustment for Eleanor's house, immediately. My father's face drained. Trust adjustment? Grandma's voice was calm. Yes, she said. My mother whispered, Mom. You're punishing us. Grandma stared at her. No, she replied. I'm protecting myself from you. That sentence changed the air in the room. Because once a mother realizes her child is a threat, something irreparable occurs. My mother lowered into a chair like her bones had suddenly become heavier. My father's shoulders sagged. And I sat there, quiet, letting them feel the weight they had always redirected onto me. Grandma looked at me again. Cora, she said, I want you to have it. My breath caught slightly. Grandma. She lifted her hand. Not because you want it, she said, but because you respect it. Her gaze sharpened. And because you won't let anyone play games with it. My mother's head snapped up. Mom, she can't. Grandma cut her off. She can, she said simply. Aunt Diane nodded. She can, she confirmed. And she should. My father's voice turned brittle. So we're just cut out. Grandma looked at him with tired clarity. You cut yourselves out when you chose Melanie's comfort over my care, she replied. Melanie emerged from the bathroom then, face swollen from crying, eyes red, voice trembling with desperation. You can't do this, she whispered. Grandma, please. It was a mistake. Grandma's gaze didn't change. It was a choice, she said. Melanie stepped toward me, eyes pleading. Cora, she whispered, tell her. Tell her you don't want this. I studied my sister's face for a long moment. I remembered nights in the ICU, watching families bargain with doctors the same way Melanie was bargaining now, desperate, manipulative, trying to trade emotion for outcome. But illness does not negotiate. And neither does truth. I don't want your punishment, I said quietly. I want your repayment. Melanie's lips trembled. I don't have it. Aunt Diane's voice was calm. Then you will earn it, she said. Melanie's expression cracked. I'll lose everything. Diane's gaze remained steady. That is usually what happens when you build your life on other people's sacrifice. My mother sobbed quietly. My father stared at the floor. And Melanie finally understood that no one was going to rescue her this time. The fallout arrived quickly after that. Real estate deals don't care about family tears. If Melanie didn't meet the closing deadline, she lost the deposit. And she did. Within 24 hours, the frantic calls started. Not to me, at first, but to my mother. My mother tried to soothe, tried to comfort, tried to fix it with the same reflex she had always used. But the numbers didn't bend. Melanie's investment collapsed like a cheap stage set. And when it did, the truth became even uglier. Because it wasn't just that she lost the money. She owed more. There were penalties, debts, obligations she hadn't mentioned because she assumed she would never be forced to. My parents' savings took the first hit. My father's retirement account got drained in the name of helping Melanie recover. Then my mother's emergency fund vanished. And still it wasn't enough. Melanie had always been a bottomless need. She called me one evening, voice thin, almost unfamiliar. "I need help," she whispered. I stood in my kitchen, staring out at the city lights, calm in a way that would have once been interpreted as cold. "No," I said. There was a stunned pause. "Cora," she said, voice rising with disbelief, "I'm your sister." I exhaled softly. "And I was your bank," I replied. She began to cry again, loud and ugly this time. "You're really going to do this?" "Yes," I said simply. She hung up. And for the first time in my life, her tears didn't move me. Because tears are not repentance. They are often just frustration when manipulation stops working. My parents tried next. My mother called first, voice trembling. "Cora," she whispered, "we're drowning." I held the phone to my ear, listening to the tremor in her voice, and felt something melancholic settle over me. Not satisfaction. Not revenge, grief. Because I had wanted a family that could hold itself together without using me as the glue. "What do you want me to do?" I asked quietly. "Just help a little," she pleaded. "We'll pay you back." I closed my eyes. I could picture it already. How a little would become just this once, and then become you're selfish, and then become you'll understand. The endless loop. The patriarchal allocation of my resources toward the family's favorite fire. "No," I said softly. My mother's voice sharpened. "So you're going to punish us?" "I'm going to stop saving you," I replied. The line went silent. Then my father took the phone. His voice was low, hard. "You think you're better than us now?" I almost laughed, not out of amusement, but because of how predictable it was. "No," I replied calmly. "I think I'm done being used." He hung up. And I let him. Aunt Diane handled the legal structure with quiet efficiency. The medical account was secured. Grandma's house was transferred into a trust that protected it from anyone who saw it as a prize rather than a home. The repayment agreement was formalized. Melanie signed it with shaking hands, because for the first time in her life, she had no softer option. Grandma Eleanor's care stabilized. Her medications were covered. Her appointments were attended. And the most surprising thing happened. Her health improved slightly. Not dramatically, but in the way that matters. Her shoulders loosened, her appetite returned, her eyes looked less haunted. Because stress, at that age, is not just emotional. It is physical. It gets into bones. It weakens the body. And now, she wasn't being treated like a resource anymore. She was being treated like a person. As for me, my life became quieter in a way that felt like liberation. I stopped checking my phone with dread. I stopped bracing myself for requests disguised as affection. I stopped losing money in the name of keeping peace. Priya and I began having dinners again, simple meals, honest laughter, the kind of companionship that didn't require me to bleed for it. And I started sleeping. Not just collapsing into exhaustion, but resting. The kind of rest that comes when your nervous system finally understands the emergency has passed. One afternoon, weeks after the party, I visited Grandma Eleanor. She was sitting by the window with a blanket over her lap, tea steaming gently on the table. She looked up when I entered, her expression soft. "Come sit," she said. I sat beside her, and for a moment we just watched the afternoon light shift through the curtains. "You know," she said quietly, "they'll call you cold." I smiled faintly. "They already have." Grandma nodded. "Let them," she said. Then she turned her head toward me, eyes sharp again. "You weren't cold," she said. "You were finally firm." My chest tightened. I reached for her hand and held it gently. She squeezed back. "Your mother wanted a daughter she could lean on forever," Grandma murmured. "But she never asked if your bones could hold it." I swallowed. I didn't know how to stop. Grandma's voice was calm. "You stopped the way you stopped this," she said. You choose yourself without asking permission. Melanie did lose everything. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in the slow, humiliating unraveling of a life built on shortcuts. She moved out of her apartment when she couldn't afford it. She sold her expensive things, one by one, trying to make the repayment schedule. She started answering calls she used to ignore. She applied for jobs she would have once considered beneath her. And every time she complained, my parents grew quieter. Not because they suddenly became wise. Because their resources were gone. Their ability to rescue her had been exhausted. And when the rescuer runs out of oxygen, the person who has been consuming it panics. Melanie panicked. But she learned. The hard way. The only way she ever would have learned. My parents, in the end, were left with the consequences of their own favoritism. They didn't lose their home. They didn't lose their lives. But they lost their illusion. They lost the convenient daughter who made their choices painless. And without me as their cushion, they were forced to feel every impact. My mother tried to rebuild a relationship with me months later. She invited me to lunch as if nothing had happened. She spoke carefully, almost timidly, like she was approaching an animal that had finally learned it could bite. "I miss you," she said softly. I studied her face for a long moment. "I miss who I used to be," I replied calmly. My mother swallowed. "I didn't realize." "No," I interrupted gently. "You did. You just didn't think I'd stop." Tears filled her eyes again. But this time, I didn't fold. I let them sit there. Because some emotions are not meant to be fixed by the person they harmed. They are meant to be carried by the person who created them. On Grandma Eleanor's 76th birthday, it was quieter. No big party. No forced speeches. Just dinner with me, Aunt Diane, Priya, and Grandma. We ate slowly. We laughed gently. Grandma looked at me across the table and said, with a hint of pride, "You look lighter." I smiled. "I am." And I meant it. Because I had finally understood something the ICU teaches you but families often refuse to learn. You cannot save everyone. Not even the people you love. Especially not the people who profit from your saving. I didn't forgive Melanie. I didn't excuse my parents. I didn't rewrite the past into something softer so it could be more comfortable. I simply stepped out of the role they had written for me. And when I did, their entire system collapsed, exactly as it should have. Because any family structure that requires one person to be endlessly exploited is not a family. It is a machine. And I was done being its fuel. I was Cora. The easy daughter. The one they thought would always fold. And in the end, I didn't have to scream to be heard. I just had to stop giving them access.